Altitudes of Horror Part 10, Violet, Subtle
Yeah.
Visionary.
Every time I do Violet, David Lynch is kind of my go-to there. I really don't know a ton of media like films that have like really specifically subtle energy like other than David Lynch projects. So surrealism and avant-garde, like both of those movements in film have a little, they're mostly coming from green meme counter-cultural thing or like an alternative sort of thing. I think what happens is more and more as you get meta-fictive and as you get to the point where themes are more important than action, plot, romance, that sort of stuff, where themes become central and you're creating a really, intellectualized product, it becomes subtle like in nature. It becomes similar to a constructed psyche. And you can't just take for granted that as I watch this story, the assumptions that I make as a person in this assumed world, as this assumed person, I can carry those into the characters in the story. And so I can just kind of vicariously live out a story. That's generally how we do stories. The Violet story is doing a kind of different thing. It's throwing story, character, that stuff at you, but the intended effect is to induce a state of consciousness on you. It's to get you to question the constructed reality and the construction of the self. As diverse as David Lynch's film and media catalog is, I think that everything he's ever done, that seems to be like at the heart of what he's trying to do. I think when he talks about what he's trying to do, that comes out a lot as well. The way he makes movies, he calls it like dreaming, like actually uses like we're dreaming. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. I think that whenever you make a movie, you're dreaming, but you're not really dreaming the way dreams dream. You're dreaming the way that people tell ego stories in a concrete, assumed reality with certain cause and effect to all the events that occur, and very little ambiguous, it would seem, in that context. That's a little intro to David Lynch and a little intro to Violet. What do you guys got? I love your
Oh,
his shirt. Did you
Mhm.
say you liked his shirt?
I did say I liked James's shirt. Yeah.
I picked it out.
Good job.
it
Where did
is.
you pick up?
It's not the same colors I usually go for, but it is the
Yeah.
appropriate thing here.
There would be like because the pink is looks like your skin tone, so there'd be like worry about that, but it's great. It works.
The camera and the light aren't doing me any favors.
It makes your arms look nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
does this shirt make my arms look ugly?
On that subject, I did. It came down to basically like why do women shave their legs? Because they don't know about Nair, right? So I got a bottle of Nair, and I read the instructions. I did my best. I ended up shaving off like fuzz off of myself with a shaver at the end of this process. I think I was supposed to wait longer, maybe with the goo on myself. It was
It takes a minute. Yeah, it takes a while. Yeah.
Okay, it said don't exceed 10 minutes, so I was like, okay, that's for like, they have to consider all the different ranges of hair. My hair is weird. It's strong. Like it'll take some shit. I've noticed this about my hair, and so yeah, it mixed results. I still probably will shave mostly. It was a nice time saver. It shortcutted me a little bit. Another callback is that turning my desk around would allow the light to be on my face. I'm still a little bathed in shadow, really. I said it would solve
Nothing
all
like
my
before.
problems. I don't really have problems, so I think that it did solve all my problems. Well, that's the story there, and it really needed to be turned around. It took like several hours, but it had to happen. It's so much better. It really did solve like.
I'm pretty well lost when it comes to Violet, and spotting it in media or really anything. Third tier's tough, man.
I mean, good, because that's probably where a lot of people are at, right?
Yeah.
I looked up browser YouTube Ken Wilber Violet. It's all on Think Me. Like nobody covers this third tier of the altitudes. Very like not even Ken Wilber.
I mean, it's all
very weird.
speculative for the most part, and there's
lots of things are speculative. They're on the internet.
Past the part of development where we have reference.
I mean, but there's so many things like this. It's just surprising that is not like Nobody else is like sharing this information or, speculate, whatever you want to call it.
I mean,
It's just,
I'm not going to
it's weird
debate
that
you
it's
on
not
this.
referenced more.
Also, didn't the internet basically tell us to skip Violet because
That was ChatGPT, yeah.
because they basically were like, it's going to be too hard to nail down.
Yeah,
Well,
most people skip it, and I suggest
let's
you
just
do the
cover
same.
that really
I
briefly.
suggest-
All right, this is the situation. Spiral dynamics goes up to what we call indigo. Ken Wilber used to, when he was super popular, use spiral dynamics. So in general, people who are into Ken Wilber use spiral dynamics, and it only goes up to stage 9. Ken Wilber does talk about 10, 11, 12 at length in all of his work. He just doesn't set them on top in just that come after, that the altitudes are an updated version of spiral dynamics. That is his position. So people representing him, it's funny that they are not representing the position that he himself takes on this topic. So if you are familiar with spiral dynamics in Ken Wilber's work, then what we're talking about here is what he calls state structures, psychic, subtle, causal, non-dual, as a trait, as an ability to regularly access, and as something that informs the way that you think, feel, and do your actual existence right now. So they're essentially the same thing to say that if you've grown up along altitudes or spiral dynamics to the turquoise stage and you're looking to move forward into indigo, you're going to be entering into psychic states of consciousness and making them permanent as traits. That's the Ken Wilber position. It's definitely open for debate. So if you are that person, that's where you're coming from, just understand that if you want to understand these stages, it's the same thing as psychic, subtle, causal, non-dual states as permanent traits, starting from turquoise. That's what it is. But that's also just a sliver of people. We also have people who are not at all familiar with Ken Wilber or spiral dynamics in the first place. And we also have people who are familiar with altitudes. But essentially, the more we talk about those states of consciousness, that's our frame of reference for the stage of consciousness that would theoretically be in that third tier of altitudes. It's really only speculative to the extent that you're saying that this is the same map, that the spiral dynamics continue into these, because that is not a thing that is a thing that would have to be proven in time, by time. If in red meme era, there was somebody writing books about how there's this process of development to get from red meme to amber meme to orange meme to green meme or something like that. You can't really do whether it's correct or not. Like maybe you're at that stage and you see like, oh God, this is the course. Like even so, there's no green meme culture that exists at that time, and so there's no frame of reference. That's the situation that we're in here. This
is the part of the map that has sea monsters drawn.
Yeah.
Nobody goes that way.
That's
but watch
what I'm
out
saying.
for the sea monster.
Definitely that region exists, is what I'm saying. That mysterious region exists. What's in it specifically, you have to go there to see it. It's not even a thing you can map according to its own rules and definitions, right? Moving from turquoise becomes, it's like turquoise, you've solved this whole thing of being a story in a generated world. You're about as covering the bases of that reality as you possibly can. And there's really nowhere else to go but, up, just keep forward on just like keep building stuff, keep innovating. Like that's all well and good. But there's this entirely other path of, instead of constructing this story, this reality, you are operating this brain that can do all sorts of other things besides that. And as we explore the subtle, this is us directly not thinking about it from our story constructed reality, but actually directly experiencing what the mind can do when it's not generating a person and an environment. Or it's in the psychic, we're sort of we're breaking down that barrier. We're breaking down the story. Oneness is being experienced. In the subtle, that's all kind of, we're past that. We no longer have this assumption of a story. We no longer have this assumption of physicality and body and environment. So subtle is a pretty different region, but it's really just further down another path. It's slower brainwaves, it's deeper introspection, and it's relaxing the constriction of ego and story, like the things that you do that you've been trained and that you're really good at, extremely intelligent at, in constructing the story of yourself and the emotional positions that you hold to and the things that you're attached to and the relationships and the history of them. All that stuff is just metadata that exists on this object. And to maximize that object, you just maximize the altitudes up to turquoise. But no matter what's happening there, you're also this other thing. You're this consciousness piloting a brain, generating an experience. And these stages go into that, not through discourse and thought, but through direct experience, through shutting off this machine and seeing what does the brain do when it's not making a person happen? Or what does a mind do, whether you want a left hand or right hand of the quadrants. And so that's like kind of my accessible way of describing this, right? It doesn't require any like religious anything. It's just saying like all throughout history, people are reporting you sit in this way where you're paying very close attention, but only to one thing or to nothing or to everything. Those are kind of the three possible things to focus on exclusively. And you develop this single-minded focus. And when you're single-mindedly focused on something, that means more and more you're not focused anymore on everything that you're normally focused on. And you start to realize everywhere you go, everything you do, in every interaction, you have all this baggage. You have this whole pre-computed narrative that you enter every situation with. You start to notice just that. I think this is what's visionary about subtle is that as you re-enter this realm, you start to see that stuff bleeding through in every situation. You start to see the infinity of opportunities and the creative potential of like every situation that you're in. A subtle piece of art should be inspiring that in you. It should be inspiring the dissolution of narrative, the dissolution of physicality and structure. Everything that we experience is an actual symbolic representation. Like we sense information and we make a symbolic representation. Now we have to ask like, well, what are those symbols I'm using? When I think of a horse, what am I thinking of? Is that a realistic horse? Is my horse concept, does that actually match real horses? Or are things like I'm missing? Did I make a healthy horse or an unhealthy horse? And these questions, because like you just do this shit automatically, like all the way up to like second tier, you do this. It just happens on its own. It's trained and it's monkey see, monkey do. But when you really start looking at this process, you realize that what's been trained into us is associations of patterns, associations between symbols and emotional realities, or symbols and egoic stories. A movie is just a pile of these symbols designed to manipulate your emotions to make you feel whatever the genre is, whether that's scared or excited or happy about your life or miserable about your life, questioning things. The subtle film is trying to induce on you a state of dissolution, of relaxation, of all that. So it's going to behave pretty differently than a conventional narrative, and it's going to pretty much deliberately break like all the rules it can, while still holding to its own rules with its own kind of code and its own internal system of operating. You're going to see like really iconoclastic art. Every David Lynch movie has these things in common that overlap, that create multiple universes. But to David Lynch, a film is sound and video. So 50-50. Sound is just as important as video, as picture. And we've been taking that attitude more, and it's been paying off. It's really true. We generally think of videos as like a picture story, but it really is sound and video. So, what can you do by exposing a human being to sound and video? Is it possible to induce states of consciousness? This has been an open scientific question for a long time. There's various technologies that exist that induce states of consciousness, some of them more invasively, right? It's a thing that you can do non-invasively. Generally, these sort of avant-garde, startling, slow-paced, artsy things lead a person towards introspecting on the symbols that they use to construct reality. And the more you're doing that, the more you're looking at archetypes. Jungian practices are a way of getting into subtle, I would say. I would say so that there's an overlap between the Jungian thing and this Eastern stuff that I'm more representing in what I talk about. Though I do talk about Western stuff as well. I try to keep that included. We talked about salvation last time, So if you miss stage 9, tune into stage 9. To bring it into familiar, we're basically talking about religion. What the effect that violet has on a person is essentially as you disidentify, like we spend a lot of our energy goes into emoting the personal story that we're being. You know, you look at people and you're like, why does this person carry a general emotional valence of nervous or aggressive or sad? You know, why does this person like have that? In Violet, you wouldn't just be this kind of undercurrent. It would actually be like front and center. This person, you would totally understand why the reality that you construct is sad. And so if you were making pictures, you'd make sad pictures. As you break away from ego-based narrative, there's less to complain about because there's less stake in anything because you're not attached to things and you know that everything in existence is built to fail. Everything falls apart and this is, you know, the noble truths. This is just the fact of reality is nothing lasts forever. If you really are released from that, if you really are free from that and you're just experiencing reality as it is without attachment, it actually makes you a super compassionate and loving and caring person and capable of really internalizing stories from other people as your own. So that's where we talk about this kind of bleed over and oneness sense between people. I think you see that maximally in Violet. Religious zealots have often had like these sorts of subtle states, and those states are really life-changing because in this state, it feels more true than your day-to-day reality. It feels like you've woken up for a dream into a greater reality. So when we talk about these states, it's often like, okay, you go into this weird constricted place and you see like a weird vision. It doesn't feel like that from the state. In the state, it feels the opposite. It feels like your normal reality is this constricted, constructed, dilated thing. And I've just come out of that. I've just woken up from that. It makes me grateful. It makes me really devoted to the mission that we're doing here as conscious beings. It makes me understand that the other people in this world are doing their best. They generally have emotional conviction for what they're doing. So that would be like kind of the character is it's just basically love. It's just like without attachment, I'm just so astounded that anything exists in the first place that I can only experience it as this like treasure, as this extremely valuable stream that's being gifted to me at every moment from not me, from something else. It's like why am I receiving this transmission? Well, we've been told it's because you were born in a body and that body had a brain and that brain generated a person. And so this brain is imagining you're happening. So you have this location and you have this moment in time that you're experiencing and all that. And that is all true. Those are all true facts, but that's just one thing that you can be aware of. And as that being that's doing that starts to look deeper into the way that it's comprehending reality, it starts to do this thing, right? So in stage 9, we talked about how psychic self or the psychic being is dissolving a boundary between self and environment, self and other. The general self sense is collapsing because it is just something the brain has invented to simplify matters. It's created quadrants and it's given you stages to express in the form of what we're trained to think, feel, and do. Okay, so then we're looking at that and we're finding that some people have kind of gotten through that into these states that allow you to create that thing itself, you know, to create the story and to create the meme, these intuitive and visionary states. And they seem to have been guiding culture all throughout history in the form of like religious stuff, like religious narratives, because that was the meme that people were at the time. In terms of the firsthand experience, subtle as opposed to psychic, it's no longer, it's not just deconstructing, like the thing is ashes, like the oneness is like a given here, but there's still that when you have oneness between two things, there's still two things, right? So I still experience an idea of self in relation to often an idea of a deity, and deity in this sense is just to take like some symbol or emotion, anything really, just one singular thing, and focus exclusively on that until it becomes all of reality. And so that's a subtle state. In that state, there's still an experiencer and a thing that is experienced. So I might feel like oneness with a deity, but I still have the sense that I'm like a ball of energy here, and the deity is like a cloud around me, like firing me with electricity. And this is literally, I'm not seeing it with my eyes, but the same thing in the brain that generates the content you get by processing what goes into your eyes, that same part of your brain is generating this. So it's like you're seeing it. It seems it's the same, like how a person who's having hallucinations, what they're seeing is just as real to them as though they were seeing it visually in real life, and you could take a picture of it. So this is kind of an interesting thing in the subtle realm. And yes, it's the same thing as hallucination. It's the same category of thing. It's that your brain has the capacity to generate it is generating this content, so it can generate things that are incorrect, or it can generate things that are profoundly meaningful. The person who accesses the psychic and the subtle is uniquely equipped to understand the difference between something that's generated purely by the mind and something that's generated off of sensory data or historical data. All right, what does that make any sense? What do you take from any of that?
Makes implicit sense. Okay, so I'm starting to understand that stage. At that stage, everyone hates you because you're just accepting everything, and everyone is covetous of that ability. And then also at that stage, nothing that happens is wrong. Oh, that shouldn't have happened.
That's a good point.
Everything happened.
Everything happened.
And so it was the right thing to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
and that's frustrating. That's frustrating.
Not to that person, not to the one.
Yeah.
It's frustrating to everyone else. Yeah. And so they want to bring you back down to being angry at whatever
and this
happened.
is what they're saying too. They're like, well, my whole life I was frustrated and people pissed me off, and then I got over that, and so this is how you do it. And they're like, oh, fuck you, that pisses me off that you do it. Like, yeah, that's
exactly
what they've been saying.
You want to be, everyone else wants to bring you back down so that they can complain about the person at the DMV that took too long or whatever. To the empathy to like the 10th degree. It's not empathy in the sympathy part. It's not empathy in the
full compassion.
Well, they must be doing pretty bad, and so I guess I'll let this one go. No, it's empathy as in like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Nice.
And I have to stress too, like I describe bliss as like the default setting, but I mean, yeah, again, this is an extremely empathetic state. Like you're experiencing like the death of everything in the world all at once. It's also extremely terrifying, extremely tragic. It's everything. It's emotionally intense. The default is bliss, but part of the gift is this. It's a terribly sad story, and it's very frustrating as you play an ego character. But the point here is you've become able to detach from that. You've become able to say, okay, I can be this, or I can not be this. I can be everything, or I can be this thing. It's just like having that capacity, I think, would define like the violet individual upper left system that would then have to make culture and society and inventions. And yeah, we're working on it. Zoom. No. We love Zoom. Here's our official.
Oh my God.
That's the internet. That's not Zoom. Don't blame Zoom for this. Don't blame games. E3.
And that is, of course, the business model to displease us with the 40-minute limit on the best service available so that we'll get premium. So good job. Zoom's great. Zoom's doing great. Yeah, I think. Smart.
So you froze on our end big time. Like, man, I love Zoom. And so that's the business model.
I love it. This is the business. The least annoying. And again, I use Linux, they use Windows, lots of people use Windows. So it's got to be a thing that works with like everything. Zoom, absolutely. We'll next time there'll be a check involved, Zoom. All right.
Where I'm paying for premium. I hope you accept checks.
Well, we get the premium with the package, with the 2-week package.
What exactly is included in the
what
premium
is included
package?
In the package?
Danielle heard your dad's voice, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's so deep." Like, yeah, imagine being children.
I would have been terrified.
What?
could you bring the
Yeah.
curtains? We're gonna take some photos whenever you get a chance.
That was
You can imagine
intense.
some very Oedipal children coming of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, like James Earl Jones' voice. Like my father is voiced by James Earl Jones, which is also just me slowed down. If you just take my voice and slow it down, it is my dad, and I learned that. And people are like, "You do a really good impression." I'm like, "Yeah, I talk slower and lower. That's all
Also,
it
you
is."
came from his loins.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And you listened to him speak for like X number of years. So
Oh
yeah.
God, yeah.
I get it.
It's a sedative to me. He's a very hypnotic speaker. It just
I was
chills me.
just it caught me off guard.
My friend Craig and I wanted to create a help support line where you just call it's like 1-800-Larry or something, and you just dial the number and he calls Larry, and it's just like, I want you to imagine a bunny rabbit hopping
Oh,
through a field,
I
and you go to crouch down and pet its fur, and the
I thought
fur
your
feels
business
soft.
plan was to just let your dad get these random phone calls,
Yeah.
and that's still soothing. Like,
And
oh, I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number.
yeah, and there's a 40-minute
Okay, I
limit.
feel better.
If you want to go longer, you got to get premium, but otherwise he'll just do this. He's just gonna he's gonna talk either way. We're gonna patch it through to our interested callers. That's what we do, right? We're gonna do this either way. You film it and put a little more effort into it. It'll make it. I look at my invisible glass. Is
I
that
was
fucking
gonna
dope?
say, oh my.
Drinking my own media, drinking my label. I like to do when I edit these shows. I notice our vocabulary issues, and one of the ones that I brought up last time was pareidolia and
Okay.
apophenia, which apply to these topics quite a bit. Apophenia is the general. It's just seeing patterns in chaos or patterns in randomness, any sort, intellectually or making connections, seeing TV static and seeing a picture. So anything whatsoever. Pareidolia, on the other hand, is specifically seeing faces and stories because of human face recognition capacity, seeing those in the inkblot test or in clouds. So apophenia more general, pareidolia more specific, to do with seeing faces and visuals, seeing like story stuff in your environment. Both of these pertaining to the construction of self and reality, so having to do with that psychic and subtle, distinction. Just naturally, we're pattern recognizing beings, and so I do it all the time, looking at my light switch or like a house or something. It's like, oh, it's a little smile. It's like Mario World. Everything's got a little face and it's happy.
Oh, there's a Facebook group
But I'm
that
mad.
I see that keeps
Yeah,
popping up. That's called like face spotting or something, and people
yeah,
just post random shit. It's like a banana, and they're like, "Do you see the face?"
yeah.
And it's like,
Banana and orange. Yeah,
yeah,
it's like I do, and the face on the moon or the rabbit on the moon. If you're more Eastern, it's a rabbit. Pareidolia, everybody, very beautiful word. Cellar door, pareidolia, very close. Apophenia, any sort like I think if you listen to white noise, you start hearing it say your name. That happens to me. Yeah, that's scary. We talked a little bit about hundredth monkey morphogenetic fields. Rupert Sheldrake, the idea that once an idea is synthesized or invented, it appears other places. An idea that I thought that just kind of went through my mind as I was kind of considering that. Okay, so like planet Earth made conscious people. Other planets that we know of haven't done that. But if it happened here, and this is a relatively normal place, we could then reasonably assume that it would happen elsewhere because this is kind of normalish and normalish exists elsewhere. So like whatever this thing is, it probably would, if it would happen here, it would happen elsewhere, right? That's like a kind of reasonable position. So then you ask like, where are all the extraterrestrials? And oh, they're in different times, lots of different ways to approach.
There's where I lean. Oh, I wasn't going to get
Yeah,
into this, but the
absolutely.
vastness of time multiplies the vastness of space.
In my way of thinking, I don't really like the idea of uniqueness. I don't really believe in uniqueness. I think that everything's an example of another thing, of another thing, of another thing. And it makes the most sense to me that we're not the only thing doing this. That would be a very weird thing in terms of the reality that I know. If there was only one person that was experiencing being inside of themselves, or if there was only one planet producing conscious life or life at all, that would be like a very out of character thing for this universe to do. It generally does the same shit forever, over and over again, is generally how it rolls, as far as I kind of seen. And so, okay, so that applying that to this idea, it's you could take it backwards and say rather than coming up with something makes it a potential elsewhere, the fact that it was come up with suggests that the preconditions were in place. And that's more how I kind of use it in my sense of like uniqueness, that I don't believe in uniqueness. It's more like if a thing has happened, it probably happened a lot. Like why what in the world would create preconditions for a thing to only happen once? That isn't a thing that happens. Our reality is very structured in terms of repetition, it would seem. You know, imagine if there were only like 32 people in the world. This whole world, there's only 30. It's like, why the fuck are there only 32 people? It's a huge, it's so big. So we make more people. We'll figure that out. Like you got to repeat, fill it up until it's like until you can't possibly track in your mind how much of it there is. That seems to be how it rolls, like how the universe works. So in all these, I think that's kind of how I treat it more externally than internally. Like the idea of creating a meme is really crazy. It's really wild. You know, the idea that like you could, okay, so let's say that it's not unique and there's planets all over the cosmos with life on it, but none of that life becomes intelligent and starts peopling and making societies and trying to get off the planet and shit like that. Ever. Never happens. This is the only time. I don't buy it. It's unique. So if planets make life, they then make consciousness. It's like, because that's how it happened here, and this isn't atypical. So that happens elsewhere. Okay. And then it's like, okay, so we're in this process of things that happen stereotypically in our universe. What happens next? Right? This is like the second tier, like, oh, okay, I see the pattern. And it's like, we are not at the end of anything. We are like in the middle, clearly not at a beginning or end of this thing.
If allowed to carry on through external means.
Yeah,
I mean, the planet becomes uninhabitable, then we won't know.
Abort is always an option, but we would yeah. Then it's like, okay, does every planet abort? Does every planet get to this stage and then nuke itself? Do some planets get out of it? Yeah. So that's what we don't know though, because we not only don't have an example of the next stage, we don't even have examples of planets that have made it to the life stage. We're so close though. Don't you think, have we done that? Maybe in the last like 4 years, we actually found like some freaking plankton on another, gosh, we're so close.
Yeah, we have.
Oh, we're good on that?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, great. Yeah, see, like
fossilized bacteria on Mars surface.
Oh, okay. I love it. That's perfect. So that's our next door neighbor. So we're to assume then that it used to have water and that it tried to make life and it got to like a cellular level or something, or is that kind of our narrative?
Yeah.
I don't know. The Mars thing, the whole Mars thing. Right?
And then the core of the planet solidified, which destroyed the magnetic field of the planet. And then because of that, the atmosphere dissipated. So all liquid water just evaporated into space.
I love how we're kind of, for the first time, taking seriously the notion of colonizing Mars. And this is where like our framework becomes problematic. Like we've named this planet Earth, which means like home soil. You know, this is our place. And then we've named this one War. Like this is our god of war. And it's going to be the first one we go and colonize. What could possibly go wrong? I love it.
Space Force kind of nailed it. The comedic show with Steve Carell, they're trying to create bases on the moon. 2 different countries make 2 different bases, and then they all left the base to go sabotage the other base, so that they would be the only ones. And then each country saw each other coming back from the other base. They sabotaged each other at the same time. Now no one has a base.
The crabs pull the other crabs out down the bucket. It happens quite a bit. Yeah, it's you just want to say like, all right, let's go back to the space race and let's do it together. Let's pool our resources and do it as a planet. This will be the first thing we all do as one big family. Go and explore the cosmos together. Like, because once you get up there in the rocket, does it matter who's Russian and American anymore? You're not even on the freaking Earth anymore. Like, there's no communism in space, Donald. You know, like
At what point is like the continent imaginary line blurred because that's you can see the planet we all just came from?
they all have this oversight consciousness thing. It induces a psychic state to be off the planet. You're just like, oh, I can see the story. There it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, oh, I'm a communist. I'm a. You're in space. You're astronauts. Like, they should have done it together. Then we wouldn't had to have faked anything. They could have collaborated on the film, even on the fake moon landing. I just, it's an opportunity.
It's the International Space Station.
I wanted to, when we originally recorded this, I talked about the Twin Peaks movie, and it always comes back to David Lynch for Subtle and Violet for me as far as depicting in film. And these are mostly horror movies. Mostly, they're scary, they're shocking, they're startling, I would say. So it counts. They're fear-based for sure. They're exploring fear and anxiety. Eraserhead was his kind of breakthrough film. It was the film that got him noticed, and it took 6 years to make, supported and produced by personal interest in him making a film. Like, they wanted a feature. It was going to be shorter, but it eventually turned into a feature. He made this movie that was like kind of exactly the kind of movie that he would want to make, and it's the most Lynchian movie in a certain sense, but in other ways not so much, because it's kind of exclusively in this subtle world. It doesn't break out of there and go into another place. After seeing this, George Lucas was trying to get David Lynch to work on Star Wars, and David Lynch turned it down to then later regret that decision and do Dune, is kind of how I see that story. And I wanted people at home to give a good thought to what David Lynch's, if right now Disney just hired David Lynch to make the new Star Wars, the next Star Wars movie, and call it Revenge of the Jedi. I want people to give I want to hear some pitches for that, is what I'd like. And if you don't do it, I'll do it. I'll come up with a pitch. David Lynch's Revenge of the Jedi, $45 million budget. Here we go. Let's rock. But do the activity on your own. I don't want to feed you lines. So it's a black and white picture. It's on celluloid. This guy, Jack Nance as Henry, has that. He kind of has the kid and play. He has the what the fuck flat top haircut. That's just kind of naturally how his hair falls in real life. And he had to, again, it took, I think, 6 years to make this movie. So he had to keep his hair like that. Just like me with my goatee going with the flow for 2 years. Like, unless you want to do like wigs and stuff, you have to stay looking the same way for low budget stuff. So if it lasts a long time, you got to look the same way for a long time. This story involves a sort of like cosmic genesis. It's very covertly sexual. Like, everything in it has, like, phalluses and spermatozoa, sexual undertones, but it's never really overtly sexual, which is kind of interesting. So it's an extremely like sexually charged movie, but it's not at all sexy. It's not attractive, and there's no love making occurring in this picture. This guy just kind of comes into the world. He's very anxious about it because the world itself is terrifying. Everything's like already set up and big, and he doesn't know what's going on. So he's this like, adult, like 40-year-old guy who kind of just approaches the world as a newcomer and has to go through the motions. And essentially the story that we follow, he has a child on accident. Just because the world is so confusing, they accidentally have a child. And the child is like not a real baby. It's like a weird, slimy, underdeveloped thing that's very fragile, and it screams all the time. And so the woman immediately leaves the picture. She's just, her and her whole family are totally like part of this world. They're totally nuts. At the end of the film, after enduring all these kind of tribulations, trying to protect and raise this baby that he has no idea how, he just kind of sits near it and looks at it a lot of the time, and he doesn't know how to do anything. At the end of the movie, he seems to unravel its bandages and see that its internal organs are all exposed. And he takes a pair of scissors and just kind of, what do you call it when you, with the bayonet, when you scrambles the innards.
Oh.
And presumably kills. Then he goes into heaven in his radiator and embraces this woman with puffy cheeks in the radiator. So it seems to tell his entire life story, or that of the baby. So the whole thing is very surreal and unclear. But the thing is, even though it is that way through in the micro and the macro, the whole way through, everything is just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, what? It makes a kind of sense because everything that's happening is contributing to emotional themes and to ways of seeing the world in a really consistent way. What it's really doing is kind of pulling you into David Lynch's way of seeing the world. It's kind of expressing it in a way that it becomes communicative, so that like if you watch this movie and then go out into your world, you'll start seeing this movie or any of his movies like into the structure of your world. Like it kind of infects you with this notion, and it's very much surreal avant-garde. It's about like questioning everything, deconstructing everything, visually, auditorially, story-wise, personality, character, all that stuff. Just constant questioning, constant deconstruction, which results in you yourself kind of in your own reality, like starting to do that and going like, oh my God, like everything that's happening here kind of is nonsensical, powered by libido rather than like reason. It's very strange. And that's kind of what I walk away from Eraserhead with. The reason I put it here and I put David Lynch here is not just because the movie depicts like dreamlike content, but because it kind of infects you with that way of seeing. So that's state stuff. Like state stuff is very like bleed overy. Just to be exposed to a person in that state, it kind of over time and through pressure, it bleeds over into you. And that seems to be like the only way to organically teach this stuff is through direct state transmission. So this is why people will often go to like gurus or religious authorities to get their state fix, because it can be communicated. Hi. And so David Lynch practices transcendental meditation. It's a big part of his kind of ethos and his message and what he like when he talks about his work, he talks a lot about meditation. Yeah.
I thought you were saying hi to someone that was standing behind us.
That's scary. Yeah, we made it horror. We did it. Yeah. To the extent that a movie feels like hyper real, that it brings out things in your reality, I think that suggests a kind of state transference, and so that's why like it's hard for me to even think of like a whole lot of other movies that do this. And that is why, like, I also bring up Kubrick, but I think that they're kind of on the same page. They're kind of doing a similar thing. Kubrick more in a generic sense that could be more like universally applied to people. And Lynch, I think, in a more specific, applies to kind of outsidery, like weird people. But very similar way of going about the process and an attempt to change the way that you, like, really fundamentally change the way that you experience reality just by like watching sound and picture for like an hour or two. Not a lot of people are doing that with their movies. It's kind of an interesting idea. This is the problem whenever you talk David Lynch with people who aren't into David Lynch. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm being boring because I'm talking about David Lynch.
Who made a Naked Lunch?
Very similar. Naked Lunch.
There wasn't a moment of that movie that I knew what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I would say that's a really similar movie to Eraserhead. Yeah, it's consistently surreal. It has the same themes over and over again. Comparison of humanity to insects and just the abandonment of kind of social norms. You know, again, that's in the green meme, like avant-garde particularly, but it absolutely bleeds over. I see that in that. I think so. Good pick.
If I knew what was it about, I'd tell you about it.
Oh yeah, I usually bring up like Waking Life here, which was that Linklater. He does movies where people talk about nothing for a long time, and this was like, they did that cell shading animation where you take real footage and then you kind of generalize like frames of color, but you animate it so it kind of squishes around. Cell shading animation. You probably and so it's a dream sequence where this kid who's I won't spoil it, but he's in a dream sequence and he just goes around listening to people philosophize. It's a really cool movie though. Probably 20, 30 years old at this point. Totally unique, weird, cool movie. The guy who made Dazed and Confused. He's another kind of thing you can go into a big tangent about. He's just a guy who makes movies where people talk and intellectualize. Often it's Ethan Hawke, and so it pisses me off because I hate the way he intellectualizes. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna talk about like stages of consciousness. Like, what is that? Like stages of consciousness? Right? I don't get it, but okay. So yeah. Oh, he treads water so much when he talks, and that's like to Ethan Hawke, acting is treading water. Yeah, just like I'm just kind of like you chew the scenery a little bit, you know, before we get into the line. Have a moment, right? Yeah, I mean, 'cause that's just kind of guy I am, you know. Ethan Hawke, yeah, just kind of chewing it, yeah. Oh shit, the director's here. I'm gonna mug a little bit. Yeah, yeah, no, somebody. It's like he's got that perma wired in it. He doesn't. He doesn't stop. He never stops. Ethan, is he still alive? What? I haven't seen him in a long
Oh
time.
yeah,
Is he okay? Is he all right?
Marvel Universe
Oh,
Moon?
series.
is he a Marvel guy now? Is he a power god?
He's like a anti-hero.
I love it. Bless his heart.
Oh, and he did that horror movie
Mm.
where he abducts the boy. Yeah, we talked about this.
It's open. We probably have to go.
Hey, honey,
Hey.
can you just move your car?
Oh. Yeah. Where should I move it? Just over there.
No.
Yeah, we can.
Let me go ask.
Okay. Thank you for watching, and we will be back with stage 11
11.
next time. Ultraviolet.
Okay, love you.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Namaste.